Hey buddies, in the last class we saw the various concepts which were relevant for the preference share capital. Today we will be looking at various questions which are relevant for preference share capital, and these are the questions from your module straight away. Let's look at the first question. The first question says that BP Limited issued 60,000 12% redeemable preference shares of rupees 100 each at a premium of rupees 5 each, redeemable after 10 years at a premium of rupees 10 each. The flotation cost of each share is rupees 3. You are required to calculate cost of preference share capital ignoring dividend tax. Right? Since there is a number of preference shares that's given to you, this number is immaterial because it doesn't make a difference if you take this number or not. So we'll do it directly. Right? So let's look at the various data that's given to us. Let's first compute the dividend. How much is the dividend? Dividend is basically 12% of the face value, that is rupees 100. Hence the value of our dividend is rupees 12. Let's go to the net proceeds. Net proceeds is how much? It's basically issued at a premium of rupees 5, right? So 100, that's a face value, and we add rupees 5 to this. We also know that whenever we calculate the net proceeds, if there is any flotation cost, we are supposed to subtract that from the net proceeds value, right? So this is minus 3, hence this is 105 minus the flotation cost. So the value of our net proceeds will be 102. And let's look at redeemable value. This is basically redeemable after 10 years at a premium of rupees 10 each, right? So this is 100 plus premium of rupees 10. So the value of the same will be 110, and N is given as 10 years, right? So we have all the required values. Let's write the formula once again. KP is equal to dividend, that is the preference dividend rather, plus RB minus NP whole divided by N and divided by RB plus NP divided by 2, right? This also will consider as preference dividend. So let's write this as preference dividend, right? We are simply putting in the value. You would see that PD is how much? 12 plus real value is 110 minus 102 whole divided by 10, which will again be divided by 110 plus 102 divided by 2. We need to average this out, right? Hence our value will be 12 plus 110 minus 102 is 8 divided by 10, which will be equal to 0.8 whole divided by 110 plus 102 is 212 divided by 2, which will be equal to 106. And since we are supposed to calculate it in terms of percentage, so this value will be approximately 0.75 percentage, or rather we can say it is 12.08%. Hence the cost of preference share capital is 12.08%, right? Okay, moving on to the next question. My Limited issues 10,000 12% preference shares of rupees 100 each at a premium of 10%. but redeemable at a premium of 20% after 5 years. Company pays underwriting commission of 5%. Okay, in this question it's given us tax on dividend is 12.5%, surcharge is 2.5%, and education cess is 3%. So we are supposed to compute the cost of preference share capital, right? Okay, let's look at the various data. Let's start with preference dividend. How much is the preference dividend? Is basically that it's 12% of the face value, that is rupees 100. So the value of preference share is, or the preference dividend is 12. Let's look at the next part, that is net proceeds. Net proceeds is how much? Net proceeds is, it's issued at a premium of 10%. So 100 plus 10%. Hence the value is 110. But we can see that there is an underwriting commission of 5%. We know that whenever an underwriting commission is given, that is supposed to be subtracted from the issue price. So 5% of again 110 will be how much? This will be 110 minus 5% of 110 will be 5.5. So the value of our net proceeds will be 104.5. Let's look at the redeemable value. It's redeemable at a premium of 20%. So 100 plus 20%, it should be equal to 120 rupees. And N is given as how much? N is given as 5 years, right? Okay, just before we move on, we know that in this question there is a tax on dividend that's given, right? So first of all, we are supposed to compute the tax rate, right? So here, let's suppose this to be working note. Here we'll compute the tax rate, right? Okay, how much is the tax? The tax on dividend is given as 12.5%, right? Okay, now we are supposed to compute the surcharge. Now please remember, the surcharge is always computed on this amount, right? So in this case, surcharge will be how much? This will be 2.5% of 12.5, right? Hence the value of our surcharge will be 0.3125%, right? If you just add this up, this will come to be 12.8125, right? We also know there is an education cess that's mentioned in the question of 3%. So this 3% will be computed on this amount, right? So our education cess will be how much? This will be 3% of 12.8125, right? So this will come out to be 0.3844, right? So what's our total tax rate? That is inclusive of tax, surcharge and the education cess. So if you just simply add this 1 plus 2 plus 3, our value will come out to be 13.19 in terms of percentage, right? Or if we divided this by 100, we can simply consider this as 0.1319. So this is the tax rate that's supposed to be paid by the company on the preference share dividend. Okay, let's come to the formula. Let's remember the formula. We'll just revise this once again. KP is equal to how much? KP is PD, but since we have a dividend tax, we are supposed to add this tax rate to this plus RV minus NP, that is the redeemable value minus net proceeds, divided by N whole divided by RV plus NP divided by 2, right? So simply putting in the value, PD is how much? 12. Okay, 1 plus tax rate. What is the tax rate? Tax rate is this, right? So 0.1319 plus what is the redeemable value? Redeemable value we can see it is 120 minus the net proceeds, that is 104.5 divided by N, that is 5. This total will be divided by 120 plus 104.5 divided by 2, right? So if we just compute this, we will get a value of 14.86%, and that's your final answer, and that is the cost of preference share capital, right? Okay, just moving on to the next question. Question says Simon Limited issues 10% irredeemable preference share. Please remember, this is a question on irredeemable preference share. So what's the formula of that? Whenever you are supposed to compute the cost of capital for preference share, if it is an irredeemable preference share, then the formula becomes KP is equal to dividend, or rather I should say preference dividend divided by the net proceeds, right? This is the formula we are supposed to use for the computation of this question. Of rupees 100 each for 10 lakhs, what will be the cost of preference share capital if they are issued at par and 10% premium and 10% discount? Assume that there is no dividend distribution tax, right? So let's look at the first part. Let's compute in terms of par. If you compute in the par, in that case, formula is what? NPD divided by NP, right? What is the preference dividend? So let's compute preference dividend separately. Preference dividend is 10% of 100, which is 10, and we know that NP is how much? NP is 100, right? Because this is issued at par. So the value of my preference share capital, or the KP in this case, will be 10 divided by 100. Value of KP will be 10%, right? Okay, in the second question we can see it's issued at a 10% premium, right? So if it's a premium question, in that case the cost of my capital should be what? PD will remain the same, that is rupees 10, and since it is issued at premium, so it should be 100 plus 10%, it should add up to 110, right? So now the value of my KP would be 10 divided by 110 into 100, which will be equal to 9.0 percentage, right? Let's come to the third part. It talks about discount. Again, it is issued at a discount of 10%. So the value of KP will be how much? KP is equal to PD. In this case we know that it is rupees 10, and NP in this case will be 100 minus 10%. So that should be 90, right? So in this case the cost of my capital will be 10 divided by 90 into 100. So the value of cost of my preference share capital will be 11.11%, right? So these are the various questions that are there in your module. Now in the next video we'll be looking at the cost of equity share capital, and we will be discussing various questions on that. Thank you for joining and happy learning.